Fab. So as I said, you're welcome to keep your cameras off, but if it is a time when we're doing something interactive and you'd like to put your camera on or anything, then absolutely feel free to. It's best whilst I'm kind of working through things to keep your mics on mute so there's no interference with background noise. But of course, if you have something to say or share, feel free to unmute yourselves or pop it in the chat and I can get round to answering that for you. I'll have a space for questions at the end, but if there's anything that comes up along as we go, then I'll try my best to answer that. And at the end, it would be great if you can all fill out a quick survey on how you found the session, just so we can make sure that we're covering everything that you guys want us to cover and we can continue to improve our sessions for next time round that we do them. So before we get started today, it'll probably be good to introduce myself. My name's Sally. I use the pronouns she and her. If you'd like to refer to me, you can say she does this, that is hers. And I'm the Community Partnerships Coordinator for MDXSU. So I run, as you'll see in the PowerPoint just there, there's a little postcard picture. I run the Community Placement Scheme, which is a scheme set up to provide placements outside of people's degrees to give them an opportunity to give back to the local community, to improve upon any kind of skills or experience that they want to get better at, get a little bit of experience, and the placements are all paid at £10.75, the current living wage, which is really great. We work with loads of really cool community partners from organisations that look at reducing domestic abuse or violence in youth relationships, to organisations helping local refugees, to organisations set up to improve student mental health. So as you can see, quite a range there. So that is what you'll find me doing most of the time. And there are placements released usually twice a year that you can apply to, and I'll give you details at the end of how to sign up if you want to get on our mailing list. So today's session is called Preparing for a Job Interview, and will hopefully teach you how to prepare in advance of the interview and present yourself as professional, and how to interview with confidence. So to begin with, before I share some of my tips with you, I wondered what you guys think so far about interviews and interviewing. Some of you might have never had an interview before, some of you will have had tens of them. If you can pop in the chat if there's anything that you do to prepare for an interview, that would be really helpful, please. Never had an interview in my life. Yeah, this is a great workshop for you then. CV, make sure that it's prepared. Look up general questions and practice the answers. Great shout. Research a company. Great shout for both of you there. Fabulous. And Wendy, you're usually self-employed. Oh, that takes out the stress of interviews for you a lot of the time then, hopefully. That's fantastic. Thank you, guys. So I'm going to talk through briefly before I get to some of our tips for preparing for an interview. Do you have any particular fears around interviews or anything that you look forward to in interviews? Just so hopefully, if I don't get through it with the content that I have, I can come back to those at the end and answer some of those. So just pop in the chat if you have any particular fears around interviews or anything that you enjoy. Okay, great, thank you. So we've had, since I don't know what an interview is meant to be, I don't know what I'm supposed to say and do. Totally understandable. Hopefully we'll cover that within the content today. The worst thing is trying to say what you want about the job. Yeah, that can be tricky too. Fear that I'll get asked a question and my mind will go blank, and how to answer questions you might not be prepared for. Awesome. I'm just going to make a quick note of some of those that I can hopefully come back to or answer during the session. What can you offer us? That is a tricky question to answer for them. And rushing to answer the questions because of the nervousness, and tips to tackle that. Yeah, great. So we'll also be going through some stuff to help with confidence and preparing in relation to nerves at interviews too. So that's great. Thank you very much, guys. That's really useful to know. So some of the first kind of things that we come to are stuff that you guys have already mentioned. Kind of summarize it into research, read, find, plan, and prepare. So the first one, research, that we come to, when it comes to an interview, you can't be too prepared, you know. Making sure that you're not winging it and making it up off the cuff is useful, because that's when the nerves will get the better of you. And often organizations can tell when you're feeling unprepared. And having good preparation will also help you to be able to ask those questions you want to know about the organisation too. It's not just a one-way process with hiring. So you want to make sure that it's the right place for you, and the more confident you feel, the more you'll feel able to ask the questions that you want to know the answers to. So number one, research the company. Interviewers will expect candidates to have a good grasp of what the organisation does. And so your ability to research effectively is quite important. Within your research, I guess people want to know what to research. I would definitely advise thinking about how big the company is, how it's divided up, what teams or departments they have, who their customer base is, who their competitors are, and any recent developments or plans or projects within the company. If you are applying for a job because you've seen that the organization's doing something really cool, then make sure to highlight that. They'll be really encouraged that you have a genuine interest in what they're doing. Number two, read. Reread the job description. When it comes to interview preparation, the job description is your best friend. Not only will a thorough examination of the duties and personal qualities help you to apply for the job in the first place, but it will also help you to understand what the role entails and whether it is a good suit for you or not. It'll help you to tailor your answers accordingly. So later on, I'm going to go through some specific techniques on answering interview questions, but reading that job description will be really helpful for this. Sometimes when you've been offered an interview, job descriptions are no longer up on the website. Well, that's totally fine. You can either dig it out from where you've got it saved on your computer, or you can always ask the hiring manager, could you send me over a copy of the job description, please? That's entirely acceptable, and really encouraged to make sure that you have the right information. In addition to reading the job description, make sure that you know the format of the interview, whether it's an interview with a presentation, whether you've got some formal questions to do a written answer to first. Preparing for all of this will mean that you're not surprised on the day, and you'll be able to really accordingly plan. The next thing to look at is finding and planning the address and journey. It seems very simple, but doing this well in advance is really, really useful, so you don't have to suddenly the day before realise you've got to get up 2 hours earlier to get across the other side of London. If you know that there are certain types of transport that are unreliable, always plan a backup journey or allow extra time to make sure that you're there 10 minutes prior to the interview. Obviously, at the moment, a lot of interviews are happening online rather than face-to-face. So make sure that if you have an interview over Zoom or another online platform, make sure that you know how to use that platform. Make sure you have the link up and ready in advance. You can always do a quick tech test to make sure that everything is going to run as smoothly as you would like it to. Lovely. Number 4, plan. So this is about planning your outfit and what you're going to wear. No, it is not a fashion show, but it is important to get the kind of style of clothing right for the day, making sure that it's appropriate to the role. Some people would recommend wearing a suit to every interview, but sometimes that's just not appropriate. If you're going to work in a local pottery centre, it's probably not appropriate to turn up in a full suit, but it'd be better to have something that maybe is a bit more artistic and kind of comfortable clothing that really reflects you. Avoid wearing anything that has any swearing or anything particularly offensive on it, and make sure that it's washed and ironed or prepped the night before to avoid any last minute anxieties. If you can get an idea of what other people in the company wear, then that's really helpful to avoid feeling out of place. And the final thing in terms of clothing is wearing layers is a really great shout in case the interview room is hot or cold. Having layers that you can take off or add on can be really useful to save you overheating or getting really cold in there. And finally, preparing questions to ask the interviewers. As I've kind of briefly said already, it is a two-way process. So you're there to find out about them as much as they're there to find out about you. Personally, when I'm hiring people too, if people have really great, interesting questions for me, then that really intrigues me and helps me to remember them, and they'll often really stand out there. Just one moment, I'll just grab a drink. Excellent. So this is all stuff you can do in advance of the interview. And next coming up, some of those common questions. Some of you have mentioned this in the chat as your fears of questions that you might be asked. So this might be helpful for you. There's no specific right or wrong answer as such, but I am going to give you some tips for attempting to answer these questions based upon what employers look for from candidates. So first question, the dreaded tell me about yourself. They are not asking for a full life story when they're asking to tell them about yourself. Instead, ideally, it should be 2 or 3 minutes long and briefly to kind of cover your education, your interest in the field, your work history and experience. It's not general chit chat, though it may sound like it. It's your chance to kind of set yourself up and establish who you are within the room. Number 2, what are your weaknesses? So the kind of best answers to this question, take a weakness and give a practical example of how you're trying to address that weakness. So rather than saying, oh, I'm terrible at this, and then leaving an awkward pause afterwards, it might be good to think about what you're doing to kind of resolve those weaknesses within you. So, for example, you could say, I used to find it really difficult to work on simultaneous projects. I would really prefer to finish on one task before starting another. However, since taking a time management course recently, I've learned how to manage my schedule more effectively, making it easier to multitask when necessary. Great question in the chat there. Does it have to be a weakness related to the job? I would say, interesting question. I've heard kind of mixed responses on this. I would always prefer for it to be about the job so that I know when I'm hiring someone how I can help support them in developing on that. But I know for other employers, yeah, hearing a weakness that is not related to the job can seem like a little bit more reassuring in that you think they're right for the role in the first place, if that makes sense. Yeah, I would always do it related to the job, just in hopes of kind of having honesty there, and a little bit of trust and truth, because if you're honest about your weaknesses in relation to the job, then that's where you'll get the most help and support once you've started. Great. The next question, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? This is also a tricky one. I think it's quite an intimidating question in general for anyone to answer. But this really is for them to gauge a little bit about your kind of future and your ambitions. They want to kind of make sure that this isn't just a stopgap position as such. I would always try and make this as related to the role or company as possible. Obviously, you hope to see yourself progress in one way or another. So if you're wanting to progress in that, maybe having a think about what kind of roles that could lead to, or what roles are higher up in the company, and it gives them that idea that you're looking to kind of achieve more than just this basic level. Shouldn't you be careful about what to answer here, like you can't say in your position? Yeah, I would say answering in your position is probably a little bit too informal, and also might seem like you're coming after their job role. So what you could do instead is say something like, you're saying not directly saying that, okay. Yeah, I guess it depends. If you are wanting to see yourself in their position in that amount of time, perhaps phrasing it to say, I would like to see myself in a similar position to yourself in a role within such and such department or such and such level of management, etc. That might be a better way of saying it that doesn't seem like you're attempting to come straight for their role. Yeah, exactly. I would say being a bit more diplomatic about it would be sensible. If you're going for an entry-level position, when you're asked why did you apply, or where you'd like to progress, then talking about I'd like to progress to a senior engineer, or I see myself being a team leader within this team, could be really useful. But if you're going for a more senior position where you're really aiming high, have a think about how you could look to moving the company forward. Take a look at their business strategy or kind of corporate objectives before the interview, if you can find that online, and have a think about how you can help that company achieve those objectives. Great. And next we have some more common questions that you can generally apply one particular technique to in answering them. So you might often have come across the questions, can you give us an example of when you have done this or that? Can you tell us about a time when you were can you tell us what you understand by? And then at the end of this, that will be often a skill, a quality, or kind of experience from the job description. One moment, excuse me. So here you'll be looking at the kind of essential and desirable criteria that they've listed on the job description, and that will be in there. So those skills might be, can you give us an example of a time when you have worked well independently, have led a team, have managed volunteers, have used problem-solving skills, have taken your own initiative? It could be any one of those things that's listed on the job description, and they'll insert it there. And something that is really useful is using the STAR technique to answer those questions. So it's situation, task, action, and result. So first of all, with the situation, you want to really set the stage for the story by sharing the context around the situation or challenge that you faced. In most cases, it's best here to describe relevant work situations that are applicable to the role that you're applying for. But depending on how much experience you have, you can also talk about any other transferable experiences, whether you've done an academic project, whether you've done some volunteer work in the local community, whether you've done any kind of extracurricular things, whether you've gotten involved in a society, any of the student media opportunities, if you've done a placement, things like that, they're all really relevant to include. It's really important when you are talking about the situation to talk about a specific instance rather than your general responsibilities, because they're wanting you to outline exactly how you prove that you've got those skills. At the end, I'm going to come back and do a bit of an example for you guys to outline how a STAR answer might look. For task, you're picking a specific task, so try and describe your responsibility or your role in the situation or the challenge. If you can discuss the goal or task set out, it should require a minimal amount of time. Just consider 1 or 2 points that best illustrate the task that you needed to complete, rather than an entire project. When it comes to the action, you want to explain what specific actions you took to handle the situation or overcome the challenge. Excuse me. This is the part of your answer that will require the most in-depth description. It's what indicates whether you are good for the role or not based on that action that you took. So if you can identify and discuss a few of the most impactful steps that you took to find your success, that will be really useful. And then finally, the result. As I've put on the PowerPoint, evaluate whether or not this went well and explain why. And I've put there, usually you want to say that it did go well if you are proving to the organisation that you are confident and competent in a particular skill. Then really you'll want to highlight what's really worked out well for you there. This should take about the same amount of time as talking about the action, potentially, depending on the result that you've got. It's always a good idea to try and quantify your success or provide concrete examples of the effects of your efforts. So if you have any particular statistics from feedback surrounding that project or that task that you've undertaken, relaying back the statistics that you've received to solidify what you're saying will be great, because it means they'll really believe that you have that skill. And it will also prove to them that you're not kind of making it up off the top of your head as a random experience. You know, if you've got those statistics and evidence behind it, then that'll put you in a really strong position because of your experience. So if we go from the top with situation, you might say, I worked in this position for this company and we were working on this project. It really can be as simple as that. When we come to task, you could say, I was asked to do this task where I needed to use this particular skill. In addition, I was given this to complete, which I needed to do within this timeline. You know, really, really basic and helps you to outline what's happening. When it comes to the action, you can say, in order to use this, oh, I'll go back there one moment. In order to talk about the action, you can say, in order to use this skill well, I did this, this, and this. And then finally, for result, the project was shortlisted for an award, had an 80% engagement rate, was given this piece of particular feedback, ran really smoothly, highlighting to me that this skill is one of my strengths. Okay, so I'm going to send around some resources to help you guys with this, to help plan it out. And I would really highly recommend using this technique for every one of those skills that is outlined on the job description. Plan it out in advance of the interview, and then when you go, you'll already have an idea in your head of lots of examples of when you've used that. So it stops you from drawing a blank as much when you're a little bit intimidated. Lovely. So being confident and professional in the interviews. So we're going to go through some stuff you can do before the interview, some stuff you can do in the interview, and stuff you can do after the interview. This is a mixture of stuff that you can do for yourself to help you feel a bit more confident and less nervous. And some of it is what you can put out there to show the interviewer. So one thing that's really helpful to do is ask someone that you trust to practice answering the questions with you. Make sure that it's someone that will allow you to take it seriously. You know, of course, it's okay to have fun and have a laugh while practicing, but making sure that you create a similar environment or atmosphere to the one that you might be facing in an interview is going to be the most helpful for making you feel prepared. Next, it's a good idea if you have any presentations or if you know the interview is capped at 30 minutes, just practicing your timings, relaying it back to yourself, seeing how long it takes. Doing this will make sure that you're not surprised by a half-hour presentation going over by 15 minutes. Excuse me. One good idea to do as well is if you are using a presentation, make sure that you have a backup copy somewhere. So pop it on a OneDrive file online, email it to yourself, have it on a USB, you know, make sure that there's several ways to use it just in case you have any technical issues once you arrive. One thing that I find really helpful to prepare me is doing tongue twisters if you struggle to get your words out. I've got the pictures of the red lorries and the yellow lorries there, and that is signifying the red lorry, yellow lorry tongue twister. So if you're struggling to get your words out, which I do sometimes from time to time, it's a good idea to try out these things to kind of loosen up your mouth a little bit, warm it up, get yourself ready to go. So if you've never done a tongue twister before and you're wondering what on earth I'm saying, then all you need to do is by yourself or with friends, say to yourself, red lorry, yellow lorry, red lorry, yellow lorry, red lorry, yellow lorry, red lorry, yellow lorry, red lorry, yellow lorry. And that will help you to enunciate what you're saying It will help you with getting those words out when they're tricky. It'll make less difficult words feel a little bit easier to say in the interview. And it literally physically warms up your mouth so it's ready to go and move. Another good thing to do whilst you're doing that is enunciate as much as possible. You know, make your mouth as large and ridiculous as you can so that your whole face is warmed up. So if you want to be really dramatic with it and go for it, then you can do red lorry, yellow lorry, red lorry, yellow lorry, red lorry, yellow lorry. And yes, I look a little bit crazy and stupid, but already I can feel that my face feels a little bit loosened up, ready to go. The next thing to do is just practice breathing in and out calmly. Again, it seems a little bit basic, but that's something really easy to forget when you're in a position of nervousness. Do so before the interview. If you're preparing for it, do so whilst you're in the interview. You know, you're more than welcome to stop and take a minute and just breathe in and out again. That will really help to regulate you. If you feel like your thoughts are all over the place, you're struggling, if you're someone who struggles with panic attacks or anxiety attacks, just taking that moment to center yourself is really great. You might feel a little bit nervous or embarrassed about doing that in front of interviewers, but they would much prefer for you to feel comfortable. And they'll also respect that you know how to take care of yourself, you know what to do to get yourself back onto the flow of what you're talking about. And then the final thing to do beforehand on the interviews is to remind yourself that you've made it this far. You know, you've written out an application, you've managed to go through the recruitment process of sending that off, and you've been shortlisted for an interview. That's an amazing achievement, genuinely a really great achievement. And you should just remind yourself, yeah, that you've obviously got a load of skills, a load of experience that really sets you up well for it. So try and have that confidence and trust in yourself that you're great. Lovely. I'm aware that I've talked quite a bit. We're going to go on to this in a minute, but I just wondered if anyone has any questions or anything before we carry on. Great. Seems like no questions at the minute, but feel free to pop them in at any point there. During an interview, number one, make sure that your phone's turned off. Really simple, but it can be quite unprofessional or kind of distracting really for anyone if a phone's going off in your pocket or on the table. I would probably recommend making sure that the vibrate sound is off too, as well as having your volume down, because that can be really distracting when it's in your pocket. If you're doing an online interview, one thing that's helpful just for you to stop from being distracted is just make sure that if you have any other tabs open or anything, that you can mute those tabs or turn the sound off or turn notifications off. It stops from any awkward messages popping up on your screen if you are having to screen share a presentation. But it also just means that you can stay focused and stay on track rather than worrying about what's popping up there. Number two is to smile and greet your interviewer confidently. They're there in hopes of finding someone excellent for the role. You know, they want you to succeed, they want you to have a good time. So just starting it off on a great note by smiling and greeting them confidently can be really useful. One good idea is to bring a water bottle with you, just in case your mouth gets dry. It probably will after a long time of chatting in an interview or doing a presentation. And it's funny how when you're a little bit nervy, your mouth dries up a lot quicker. So either bring a water bowl with you, or if you've forgotten it once you're there, you know, you well within your right to ask them if you could have a glass of water too. I'm sure they'll happily provide if they have access to it. Oh, I'll just go back one moment. Okay, there we go. The next one is to be polite and make sure that you are using a kind of formal tone and language when you're speaking to them. Speaking in slang terms in a really professional setting can seem that you might not necessarily know how to be professional. But obviously this is relevant to your role as well. If there's a load of jargon associated with some specific technical things that you might be working on, then of course use that. But I would always try and make sure to explain any abbreviations that you might be using throughout, just so that everyone's on the same page. And with that, make sure that your facial expressions are matching what you're saying. If you're saying, I'm really excited to take on this role because it just seems like it would really suit me. I've got some fantastic experience from my previous role. You know, nobody's going to be particularly enthused by that. So try and match your tone vocally and facially to whatever you're saying. Straight away, if you come in and say, I'm really excited for this interview, that's great, it's lovely to meet you, yeah, genuinely really nice, you know, straight away you seem a lot more approachable and friendly. Next up, listen carefully to any questions that you're asked. Interviewers will happily ask you it again if you didn't understand it or if you didn't hear it. And you can happily take some time to begin to answer the question. You know, you don't have to be able to jump straight in and it be the smoothest, easiest conversation within 3 seconds. You know, it's okay to say, can I just take a moment to have a quick think? Or, that's interesting. I'd like to consider it this way. You know, there are ways you can take a step back and allow yourself a moment, or just being silent in that moment whilst you're having a think. You know, it's always to indicate to them that you really genuinely want to answer the question well. And then the final one, be honest and tell the truth. Try not to exaggerate anything that you're doing. Obviously, we all want to put our best selves forward, but if you're telling fibs within the first interview, then that's not going to make you seem like a particularly trustworthy person. And then for you, that's going to be a bit awkward to have to keep up with those lies your whole time in the organisation. So just be honest about your experiences. If you are interviewing online, do keep your camera on if possible. It just means that they can get to know you a little bit better, and it's polite really to be able to have a two-way conversation with them. One moment. Okay, and then finally, just make sure to be polite and thank the employer. You know, it's probably quite if it's tiring and a little bit stressful for you going to the interview, remember that they've probably got about 10 interviews and that they'll probably be doing them in quite quick succession. So just showing appreciation, thanking them for their time and telling them that you look forward to hearing from them can be really encouraging. And after the interview, if you're offered the job, then let the company know in good time whether you want to accept the offer. I appreciate sometimes that you might need to have a little think about it, but do try and be reasonable with your timelines. You can also reach out and agree on a start date to be proactive if you'd like to. That shows them that you're really interested. If you decide not to accept the job, that's absolutely fine. You know, if you don't feel like a role will suit you, then it's absolutely fine to reject an offer, but just make sure that you do so politely. As you may want to work with those employers in the future, or they might be in the same industry as another employer who you're taking a role from. People talk, you know, making sure that you set a really great first impression will help for any future interviews. If you do not get offered the job, then make sure to respond positively to the employer, thanking them for their time again. Ask for feedback on your interview. The only way that you're going to get better and be offered roles, excuse me, is based on that feedback and knowing what to improve on next time. Most employers will likely take the time to give you at least a little bit of feedback after an interview. And you can also reflect yourself on the things that went well and the things you could improve on. It is really important to reflect on what went well, to encourage yourself and keep that confidence up. It can be quite difficult to remain confident when you've been rejected from a job offer. But you know, remind yourself of the great stuff that you did answer really well that made you feel good in the moment. But also think a little bit more reflectively on, okay, in an ideal world, if I'd had all the time in the world to answer this question, what might I have said, so that you can approach that differently next time. And finally, we have MDX Works. They are the university's employability services. As you can see on the picture, they're both on campus and online. If you want to access them, they can do some interview practice with you. They can book in like a fake interview, a trial interview for you, so that you can get used to that and the environment. They'll set it up so that it will reflect a real interview process. Excuse me. But you can also ask friends, family, and colleagues to assist with that too. I see a question there. Are they available to students even when we've finished our course? I am not 100% sure, Sophia. I feel like they probably will be, because they do a lot of stuff to reach out to graduates. I'm not sure if the full range of services or just some of the services are offered, but I would definitely recommend getting in touch anyway, and then they can let you know what they will support with. Excellent. So yeah, making sure to utilize family, friends, anyone who's willing to give you feedback. I would definitely recommend taking them up on those offers. Excuse me, I have a bit of a tickly cough today. Sorry about that, everyone. So how long have we got left? We've got 8 minutes left of the session. Rather than practicing this today with one another, it might be a good idea. Sorry, give me one moment. Sorry about that, everyone. As we've not got too long left of the session right now, what I would recommend is that you do some practice at home with friends, or connect with other students who want to practice too. It's a good way to do it by giving everyone a good piece of feedback, one thing to improve on, and then switching over. These are some of the example questions that might be useful to look at answering within that time. And just be, obviously, you want to be as honest as you can with your friends and give them, when giving them feedback, and that's what's most useful for ensuring that they actually offered the roles. But be aware that as well as you struggling with confidence from time to time, and the nerves associated with interviews, do be kind to them. If you are giving someone else feedback, you know, do help build them up and let them know what they're doing well too. I'm going to make sure that all of the resources we've talked about today are available to you guys online. They'll be uploaded at the end of the week. Just bear with us. We've got quite a few sessions to upload.